Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of How to Scale an Agency. I'm on with Andrew Gazdecki, somebody I've been following now for a while. He has this wonderful company called MicroAcquire. I'm a user of the brand and the software. Thank you so much, Andrew, for being on the show.
Yeah, Lucas, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
I'm excited as well. So can you give us a little bit of a summary of the last few years of MicroAcquire, how it's grown, maybe just a little bit of a bio for people who aren't familiar with the brand?
Yeah, definitely. So just maybe a backtrack on myself. So I've been an entrepreneur my whole life since like selling baseball cards on eBay and stuff like that, all the cliche things. And I had built and sold two different startups, so two acquisitions, and I thought it'd be interesting to make it easier for other entrepreneurs and startups to get acquired. So that's what MicroAcquire is. MicroAcquire is a startup acquisition marketplace, and we help facilitate, I believe, we've helped facilitate over $1 billion or $500 million, excuse me, in closed acquisitions to date. And just like the journey, so I started it by myself. I'm a solo founder. That was a ton of fun. I did everything from customer support to marketing to product development, sales, podcasts like this, just for fun. We didn't have a business model at the time. Ran the company completely free for about 1.5 years, maybe. Just because I really, if there was a sport I love to play, I'd say it's startups.
Right.
And since then, it's just, kept steadily growing.
Yeah, and remind me again, when did you guys introduce monetization into the product? Because I've been on it for a while, but I can't remember when it actually started, the monetization side of it.
Yeah, so that's a funny story. So I remember the day I started that, and it was just still me just running the company. And
Right.
there was a few complaints from sellers about receiving too many messages and just not knowing which buyers were serious and which were just kind of looking around. You know, tire kickers is kind of the term. And I thought, okay, why don't we just put up a paywall? And then I just made up this business model on like I don't know, like let's just try it. Kind of like Twitter right now with the blue check mark. I'll try it.
Right.
And it worked. And so that was rolled out maybe, I would say 1.5 years after it. I had
Yeah.
this sort of like idea, when you're building a marketplace, you want to add as much value as possible because you're kind of creating like this giant party, if you will.
Right.
And then obviously you start to organize the party. I can give some really bad analogies of like how this works. You start with kind of like just get everybody in the room, and then you
Yeah.
build the VIP section and you pay to do that. And then
Right.
you build like the sidebar that has, certain things that you can buy there. And, in relations to MicroAcquire, that would be, we have a VIP program now. We have different tools that make acquisitions easier, like creating a letter of intent takes seconds, NDA takes seconds, asset purchase agreement takes seconds. So, there's been an evolution of the product, but yeah, I mean, the initial business model was just kind of like, let's try this. And
Right.
the goal was always from day one with MicroAcquire to really focus on quality rather than quantity.
Right.
Because no one wants to get 50 messages from buyers and you're like, who are you? Are you
Yeah.
legitimate? And so that was our way of kind of reducing the number of requests for, serious conversations to happen.
Yeah. I think it's fantastic what you guys are doing. I think there's also a lot of follow-on effects with the network that I'm actually wondering if you have already thought through this part of it. But for instance, I like to use it even sometimes as a networking thing because I'll put our listing up and we are always open. I mean, if someone comes to us with the right number, people have inquired about buying my agency, I'm open to it. But I think one thing that's been great is we've met some really massive companies from the platform who have just inquired about buying us, and then we had a conversation. We ended up not, but we have them, and if we ever do sell, I'm definitely going to go to them first. And it was a really good tool, but just meeting people too, it was very valuable. Have you guys seen some sort of second order effects to the software that you maybe weren't intending, but have actually become very valuable for people? Or do you think that the best way to scale this marketplace is just focusing on the transaction? What in your mind is the most important?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I'll tell you my answer, and I don't know if it's correct, but we're laser focused on streamlining, automating, and more importantly, standardizing the whole acquisition process from end to end. So when you receive an NDA, when you receive an LOI, when you receive, a purchase agreement, when you need an escrow service, when you need attorneys to potentially review these documents, those are the things that we really want to standardize amongst the industry. So we're the default option, almost to the point where, maybe if you don't even find the deal on MicroAcquire, you still use their tooling because it makes the acquisition process so much easier. And that also includes things like due diligence. Like if you don't have a P&L because you're a smaller business, we have tools where you can connect, QuickBooks, FreshBooks. There's like 100 integrations that we have where we can connect not only your revenue, but your expenses and give you a 36-month P&L. So we're attacking all of the problems that I personally had to go through in acquisitions, which is a huge headache.
Yeah.
And there's a saying with acquisitions, time kills deals. So as we think about, our product roadmap, we've had requests like, it'd be great if like, maybe I could find a co-founder, maybe I could find an investor, maybe I could find this, maybe I could find like a partner, all these other things. But to answer your question, I think for us as a company, and I think the way I like to operate is just laser focused.
Yeah.
I said laser like 4 times.
Well, the point came across. So, yeah.
It reminds me of that Dr. Evil, like sharks with lasers or something like that. laser beams. But I think that's important because if you try to do too much stuff as a startup in general, and I've actually made this mistake with my first startup, Business Apps. And for those that aren't familiar with Business Apps, spelled incorrectly, of course, because I couldn't afford the domain. It's spelled BIZNESS apps, and it's still live today. It was acquired by private equity. But the biggest mistake I think we made at that company is we never really went very specific on solving a problem for a very specific customer. What I mean by that is we made apps for restaurants and gyms and attorneys and schools. And, if you look at some other companies, like one good example is Chow Now, they just focused on restaurants. And so what I'm trying to say is, when you spread yourself too thin and you try to address too many problems, you really are building a business where you're just kind of okay at a bunch of stuff, but you're not the best at one thing. And so we want to be the best at facilitating acquisitions.
That's fantastic. And it's a great segue because something that I was going to ask next was to talk about business apps. I'm actually in the middle of reading your book, which is great, by the way. And hearing about your story with business apps and I think how it essentially was, if I'm understanding it correctly, essentially like a SaaS plus business model, right? Because you had software to duplicate the development, correct? But then you also would actually build these custom apps for these restaurants. Is that the proper business model? Is that how I understood it correctly, or how would you describe that first company?
Yeah, you're close. You're
Okay.
we're in the same state.
We're in the same ballpark. Okay.
Yeah. So the way I would describe it, it was a do-it-yourself mobile app builder. So think of, Wix, Weebly, Squarespace, but native mobile apps, iOS apps, Android apps, and then we eventually expanded into progressive web apps, which are basically mobile websites that have the performance of a native mobile application. Our go-to-market model was heavily through partnerships, specifically reseller, white label partnerships.
Yeah.
So we bootstrapped the company, so we couldn't afford to hire a large sales team to sell to small businesses. And selling to small businesses is a very, very hard sale. It's typically done in person. I'm sure it's changed now with COVID, and just as small businesses adopt more technology. But what we did was we partnered with web design companies all across the world. I believe at our peak, we had over 5,000 agencies partner with us, and they would have a book of business. And a good example would be web design shop in Chicago, and they made 50 restaurant websites or
Right.
websites for XYZ business. And we would give them our software with their branding so they could set their price, they can customize the
Yeah.
application themselves, and then more importantly, manage the account. So we just had to focus on the technology. And
Right.
I'd always tell my team we were a distribution company. We weren't a product company, weren't, you know, whatever you want to call it, describe your company. I'd always say we're a distribution company. So we just focused on the software, and that allowed us to have just really good metrics all across the business.
Right.
Um,
Well, and I think I mean, part of the reason I ask is because we have a community of over 500 agencies in our software we build. It actually helps with partnerships. But the reason I ask is because a lot of these agencies want to build softwares, right? And I was curious, if did you guys have a service component to that though, or was it just purely the software, or was
oh
it a
yeah.
mix? Yeah.
Yeah, so we would do onboarding calls with agencies. We teach them, like, if I was speaking to your agency, we'd figure out what your book of business looked like, what kind of clients you were serving. We had white labeled marketing materials. We had white labeled marketing videos. We had courses that you could give clients that were white labeled on how to use the mobile app, because after you deploy it, you
Right.
obviously want customers to download it and utilize it. So there's kind of like a chain of
Yeah.
distribution where it's built on business apps created by the agency, and then the small business would use the app, but then it was really the end customer that would use it. So we had multiple different types of training, and it was very hands-on too, because as an agency, you have so many different products that you can sell. You know, you're
Yeah.
probably going to sell the easiest one or the one you're most comfortable with. So we learned pretty early on, the more we can make it just super easy,
Yeah.
where you're selling websites, well, maybe just package in a mobile app, and that makes it super easy, and you don't have to create any additional sales collateral or anything like that.
Right.
And so that at first we didn't do that. And we were wondering, like, okay, we have all these agencies signed up, but they're not selling apps. And then we would
Right.
do a bunch of, we'd talk to customers and they're like, well, we don't have XYZ, or we could use some help here. And so
Yeah.
at one point, at the peak of business apps before it was acquired, our customer success department was actually our biggest department in the company.
That's interesting. And for anybody who's listening, I know you said that you made some mistakes with it, but to be clear, you sold it for a pretty good amount. It was like $30 million or something like that. I forgot the number was exactly, but it was a pretty successful exit, right?
I've actually never shared the exact number, but it made me happy.
So it was a sizable one, but the point is it was a success, right? So you learned
The
from it, you moved on to the next one, but you made success with the first exit.
Yeah, I promised my wife I would just never share it, but what I can share is we grew it to 10 million in annual recurring revenue. When we sold the business, we did a stock transaction, so we benefited from QSBS, which is something you should definitely look into if you're a business owner, because it allows
Yeah.
you to write off up to basically all federal tax gains up to the first 10 million. And
Right.
then we had 2 million cash on hand, and they bought that, which was
Mm.
kind of a negotiation
Right.
tactic I used, because if you get acquired and you have 2 million cash on hand, that gets dividended out at, I think, like a 40% tax number.
Yeah.
And so by adding that to the purchase price, and they just put a 1x multiple on the cash, we were able to basically save like 500 or $1 million doing that or something.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know, but
I mean, it sounded like it was definitely successful. And I mean, one thing that I want to, oh yeah.
I gotta slip this in though. So you might be listening to this and be like, this person's like a genius or some, I don't know, but with business apps, which is so interesting reflecting back, it was a total right time, right place business where I just got lucky. Like the iPhone just came out. I was in college, so I was surrounded by early adopters. And
Right.
then before that, I had a job board where I would connect mobile developers with businesses. So I had unique insights into what a mobile app for businesses need to have.
Mhm.
So I'm really not that smart. So like it was just one of those businesses, like, every
Yeah.
agency wanted to get into mobile web development because their customers were requesting it, but they didn't
Right.
know how to hire developers. And then problem number
Right.
two, they didn't know what features to add. And then number three, they didn't have the resources to do any of that. And so we simplified all that. So instead of paying $50,000 for a custom mobile app, we would sell these applications for, $30 a month.
Okay, so you guys, so it really was there was the support element that you offered, but it really was a pure SaaS play. It wasn't like you were building these apps for them. It was not a service, right? It was just a pure
Yeah,
self-service
it was a
offering.
SaaS. Like at
Okay.
one point, just to give you an idea of the scale. So Apple releases how many apps they publish every month. I
Yeah.
don't know if they still do this, but we would do simple math on the amount of apps that we published.
Yeah.
And at our peak, we would hover around 5 to 7% of the total amount of apps being submitted to the App Store.
Wow.
So I think we created more apps than any other company in the world, but I
That's
can't
crazy.
confirm that because I don't have anything to compare it to.
Well, I really, really, really am excited for this next question because I think you're so perfectly situated for this inflection point. Maybe you're in the right place at the right time for this next trend, which I see happening. And what you did in your previous company was allowing agencies to do what I'm about to ask you, which is, what do you think about the no code movement, which is actually how we got connected because you had posted about something around no code on your LinkedIn, and I was mentioning that we love no code and we're obsessed with it. Um, how do you see that playing out in the next 10 years? Do you think it's going to be how most people build apps at the beginning, like to the first $1 million in revenue, or do you think it's always going to be sequestered into like prototype MVP early stages?
I would say both, but I would focus on I'd place a bet on the first option because I've seen it. I've seen no code apps being acquired for, millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating. It's like, you know, and also it's easier to transfer those assets. You know, I think today, people get so caught up in features and functionality, spending a year developing the product, then going to market. I think what no code really does is really two things. One, it unlocks the ability for people to build applications that aren't technical. Like I'm
Hmm.
not technical. I have no idea how to build products. I know how to manage product teams, but when it comes to coding, I have no idea. So it's fantastic. So it essentially democratizes how people can build startups and get to,
Yeah.
minimal MVP, whatever you want to call it, as soon as possible. And then I've seen those products scale to a point that surprises me. And I think further out, I'd probably extend, your prediction and say, we're going to see some businesses doing 10, $20 million using just complete no code because,
Yeah.
no one cares what your tech stack is.
Right.
No one is like, are you running on like AWS? Because you have to be. No one's
Yeah.
gonna look at your product and be like, oh, this is running on Bubble or
Yeah.
some of the other more. I'm not too familiar with the most popular no code
Yeah.
platform because there's so many popping up, which I think is great.
Right.
But they're not going to be like, oh, this is a no code product. Like even though it solves my problem really well, I don't like that. I want it to be in
Yeah.
PHP. Like no one does that, So
Yeah,
I
it
think
is
it's
really interesting just because I built the entire app on Bubble and it's been so freeing for me because I love software, but I didn't know how to develop or build anything. I know they call Bubble like a visual programming language. So it's like they're thinking it's the next iteration of development. Um, and the thing is, like, it was so freeing for me, to be able to actually get in there and start putting something together people can use. But you're right, like, people don't really care. And I think the thing that is so insightful on your side is what you said about people actually getting these apps sold. Do you think there's because you deal with acquisitions all day every day, Would you say that there's actually a difference in terms of valuation at all with a no code app versus a custom app on like a general average basis? Or do you think they should not even worry about it? Because that's the reason a lot of people don't do it, is because they're worried, like, is a custom app going to get a higher valuation and raise more money than my no code app? And that's why they don't do it a lot of times. So I'm curious, because you actually have a lot more evidence on this than probably most people. Like, do you think it
Yeah,
matters?
yeah.
Or?
I mean, so we see a lot of no code apps being acquired, and actually faster than custom applications, generally on the smaller side. And that's usually because it's a known language that people are comfortable with. They could just jump in and it's very easy to configure, and it's not something like legacy tech where, it's PHP version 1 and you have no idea is this, like spaghetti code or something like that.
Yeah.
So it actually can be actually an advantage.
Yeah.
Now, when you get to scale, I think, it also opens up opportunities where, maybe you do want to convert over to something more custom, but there has to be a reason for it. Like, is there usability problems? Is there speed problems? Is there scalability issues? But if none of that's in play, then it doesn't matter. What buyers are really looking for is product market fit, traction, and just good standard metrics for software companies. What is your
Yeah.
growth rate? What is your annual recurring revenue? What does your churn look like? How happy are your customers? If all that is good, really nothing else kind of matters.
Right.
To some degree, but to answer your question, just in a short form,
Yeah.
no, it does not ding you at all. The things that make a great business is not the tech stack. I mean, it does for some, but in a
Yeah.
buyer's view, they're going to be looking at, the business performance and not so much the tech stack.
Yeah, that's really refreshing to hear. And I know people have been dying to hear someone with some actual authority on this talking about this, because I know you're in the
But one
space.
one one thing I will note too is there are a lot of buyers that do only specifically buy apps, say like Ruby on Rails or like
Yeah.
PHP, and that's generally because their in-house team is familiar with that
Right.
coding language.
Right.
But a broader buyer group, I think, can pick up a no-code app easier. So that's why I think we see those acquisitions happening faster.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I polled our group, and I asked them to submit some questions, and so I did get one that I picked. I wanted to ask you. I think it's on everyone's mind now, especially if they're agencies, because they're getting the short end of the stick with this, because everyone's canceling their agency contracts right now. Is, what are the best business models and businesses to start during a recession? And I have a follow-on question for this after you answer this one, but that's the first one I want to start with.
I would just default to something that saves you time. So
Yeah.
really increases the operational efficiency of your business. Just simple as that. I mean, if I knew exactly like, hey, Lucas, like here's like the 10 businesses you should start right now, I'd probably be working on them. But I mean, it's just so hard to predict.
Yeah.
But I think just the core principles of what makes a great business just still applies. It's just, are you providing a solution to a painful problem? Are you helping businesses increase revenue or decrease expenses? Are you, and I bring up time because time is your most valuable asset. And if you can help me do something that maybe would take a few hours and just automate it, that's something very valuable to me, because not only are you giving me time back, you're also relieving a headache from me. So, that's why I always say you want to build a pain pill and not a vitamin. So I would think a lot about, how can you help your clients save time? Is it automation? Is it streamlining efficiencies? Just basically empowering your team to work more efficiently, faster.
Yeah, definitely transitioning it from nice to haves to must haves. Those are really, really critical. And then my second question is, maybe you kind of already answered it, which is that, how do you navigate a downturn? So, I mean, I think there's a lot of people very scared about what's happening in the market right now, but a lot of people see opportunity. especially entrepreneurs. How would you, what's your advice to entrepreneurs navigating this upcoming recession if they want to actually grow during a recession, which is possible? What is your advice?
Yeah, so I would say just tune out the noise and execute. I don't check the stock market ever. I don't care.
Yeah,
Like, because I can't control it.
yeah,
I don't need to know what it is. I mean, I'll check it like, I don't know, once a week or something like that. But I started business apps in 2010, and then I was in college during the Great Recession. So I was kind of completely shielded from the whole economic collapse and, people losing their home, like how serious of a financial issue we had. And I think sort of that, what's the word I'm looking for? Just naivety, is that the word?
yeah. I think so.
Not
It's not like
naive.
being naive.
Naive.
Yeah,
I was just naive because I just didn't know what was going on. I thought the world was just rosy, but it really wasn't. So
yeah,
I built a company as we were like kind of in a recession, and it turned out great. So I think it really just comes down to, staying focused and just pushing through, hard times, because, there is no startup in existence that has gone through like, just like, hey, it's just a good day every day, like that's just kind of what you sign up for when you build a
right.
startup. Like it gets hard. And so, if I had to give some more tactical tips aside from just, tune out the noise and execute, obviously, cash is like $1 today is, worth like 5, if you will. Like every dollar that you spend, you should kind of think about, it's like cash is worth more now than it was, say, a year ago. So the way you deploy cash, you want, that's the first thing, is like really, you know, don't overhire. Obviously, we had a saying at Business Apps: only hire when it hurts. So
Right.
when one person leaves the company, you're like, like, okay, now I have to start doing that
Yeah,
role. Like we weren't overstaffed, but we weren't understaffed. We were kind of just, if we lost one person, we'd have to backfill that role. And that's still how
right.
I operate, even MicroAcquire today, where
Mhm.
everyone is contributing. But also just narrowing your focus is never a bad idea. Like
Yeah,
you had mentioned, like, should MicroAcquire solve all these other problems? And I think if we did, we'd lose focus on, other things, and we drain resources, and, your focus would be spread thin across the team. So, yeah, that's kind of the principles I try to, bring into my companies is, relentless focus, think long term, because these things do pass. Like a recession on average lasts 12 months.
yeah,
So that's why I'm just like, I don't know, are we in a recession? Like, didn't it start
yeah.
like, did it start 6 months ago? Because if it did, then
Right.
we only have 6 more months.
Yeah,
And then I know there's a lot of like doom and gloom stuff out there, but
yeah,
business, like it's part of the economic cycle. So just
yeah.
stay alive during that time. Keep improving your product. And I'd say, if one thing, if you can, don't take your foot off the marketing pedal,
Mhm.
because you'll emerge out of a recession in better shape than your competition that may have pulled back and like went really on defense, when this could be an
Right.
opportunity for you to launch that podcast, or get active on social media, or join other podcasts, or do a weekly webinar. Like there's so many like low cost marketing things that you can do.
Yeah.
That's where I'd really narrow in on.
That's fantastic. And I think for the, I know you have limited time, so I want to try to get some last questions in here regarding content and regarding marketing, because you've done a great job. And I see you on my LinkedIn, I see on my Twitter, I'm pretty actively seeing these posts that you're putting out there. For the first, I've been in business now for like 5 years almost. And for the first 3.5, 4 years, I didn't post any content. I think that was a huge mistake. Frankly, I should have been doing that since day one. I would probably have a much bigger following, or at least just have a lot more traffic to our website than we do now. And since I started doing it 12 months ago, it's been huge for me. And one thing I always ask, people that come on the show that have been posting content and doing really well is just to describe what it's like when you actually have all these eyeballs on your stuff, so that you can inspire people to get to work and start doing it, right? Because so many people have they fear just getting going, so what is like an average day for you when it comes to the content you're posting? I mean, do you get a lot of inquiries to your business because of some of the LinkedIn posts you're doing, Twitter posts? Like, could you describe what that looks like on a daily basis from the kind of content you're putting out there? Like, what's the reward from putting out all this content for you?
Yeah, good question. So for me, I like creating content, and I think that's, critical if you're really going to start creating content is, figure out like what you like to do. So I don't write threads, I don't pre-write tweets. If you look at, things that I write on Twitter, it's always like from my iPhone. It's just some thought I have. And, I think the point there is, be yourself, don't overthink it. Don't try to go viral. Just be consistent and try to have fun with it too. Like, because that's when you'll show up every day. It
Yeah.
takes years to really build an audience. It really does.
Yeah.
And in terms of just like business impact, I think if you don't have a social presence today, you are at a severe disadvantage to other companies that do. And I
Yeah.
think we've seen that play out, and it really is just an extension of your brand, where people can relate to your brand. They see your brand. And I believe there's a stat that says, it takes people 7 times of seeing your brand until they're willing to engage with your brand. So what you're
Yeah.
doing is you're just constantly marketing. That's why I go back to that phrase, like, never take your foot off the marketing pedal, because, even during, times where it may seem bad, people are still looking for solutions to problems that you solve.
Yeah.
So on a daily basis, when you have a big following, it can get a little noisy. So I don't really reply to a lot of comments, just 'cause I don't have time. um,
Right.
but that's actually where I get my best content, because
Mm,
someone will ask a really good question and I'm like,
mm,
oh, I'll answer that.
yeah.
I don't know, when I have time, and
Right.
I move on with my day. But
Yeah.
also another thing to just understand, when you have a big audience on social, people are going to disagree with you. People are going to say rude things to you. People are going to say, but that's okay. It's just like,
Yeah.
I try to like every sort of comment just out of appreciation. Like, even if they're just like, this is the worst post ever, I'm like, maybe it is. I don't know, but I'm not deleting it.
Yeah.
So like, deal with it. Like, I don't
That's
know.
funny.
I don't know everything.
One thing you've done, I actually just recently brought on a social media consulting, because I'm not the best at social, I would say. I just I feel like I like the guidance, right? And one thing you have, which they were telling me about, was having a really strong mission, and like having this mission and getting it out there and being like almost similar. You and like Russell Brunson, you guys have these missions about like doing these big things, right? And having this almost like movement, right? That you're inspiring. Um, it's just so inspirational to see that and then being able to resonate. So I think, if from what it sounds like, that's a strategic decision. It's also an authentic decision. It sounds like you genuinely care about the mission and the movement. But would you say that anyone who's creating content nowadays, they need to have something that can get people kind of riled up and inspired, and be almost bigger than the company itself? Because that's what I feel when I see your content. I see that. So I'm curious if that's a conscious decision on your part.
I think, again, I don't really have a social strategy, which is just the weirdest thing. I don't know why people follow me. I don't know. I just share startup tips all day, and they're
Yeah.
usually very short and snappy. But it's enjoyable to me. I keep a journal where I write a lot. So
Right.
and I wrote a book. So I like to write. And so part of my like morning routine is kind of, just thinking about what's on my mind. And most of my tweets are kind of just like reminders to myself, if you will.
Yeah.
So in terms of like, the best way to approach social, I guess, when I look kind of, retrospectively, I'm getting all sorts of words wrong today. But I think just being unique, I
Yeah.
think a lot of people go on social and they look at what someone else is posting, and they'll use, I've noticed a lot of my tweets being frankly copied, which I think is flattering, but you
Yeah.
don't want to be that person. You want to be a person that's, number one, you kind of come with a different angle, or you have different like words that you use, like you're yourself, there's
Yeah.
no duplicating yourself. So I would say just be yourself, and that even includes if you're humorous, if you're serious, if you're data driven, really lean
Right.
into who you are, because
Yeah.
again, that's when you're gonna have the most fun. Like sometimes I like to post like tweets that make no sense. Like I'll say dark mode is the only feature you need, and if you're
I
not,
saw that one. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't even have dark mode at MicroAcquire. Like I just think it's funny. And then I'll say stuff like, if you haven't bought like 100 domains today, are you really like, I don't know. I just think it's funny. So my point being is like, once you're able to really find just kind of like what you enjoy sharing and it's unique,
Yeah.
that's when the magic happens. Because
Mm.
again, two things happen. You show up every day because you enjoy it. And two,
Yeah.
you're posting unique content. So you're going to stand out from the crowd that's just saying the same thing over and over and over and over. Like,
Yeah.
you know, play the long game, startups are hard, like stuff like that. That's kind of startup related,
Yeah.
um, but the number one tip I would give for anyone just starting out in social media, and because even I really started posting frequently maybe 2 years ago, and I just started with sharing stuff I was building. So that
Right.
is one of the easiest ways, like just, hey, we launched this feature, hey, look at this awesome customer review, hey, this customer is awesome, look what they're doing, we're thinking about doing this, what do you think about it? And what you're doing, and this is a quote, I don't know who it's from, but the best brand stories are ones that have no ending. And so
Right.
right now we're currently doing a rebrand for MicroAcquire to acquire.com.
Yeah.
So I'm just bringing people along for the journey. Like, we bought the domain, and then here's a weird logo in papyrus, if you've seen the SNL skit. And we did another one, or I should say I did another one, because my team's like, wait, what are you doing, Andrew? Like, but again, I'm just having like fun, and that's
Right.
when it's fun, you'll show up, and when it's unique, people pay attention.
Very, very interesting. I have two final questions for you. Question number one is, this podcast is how to scale an agency, and people want to know how to grow and how to grow fast. So what's the one thing that you found over your journey as an entrepreneur? Maybe there hasn't been a single moment, but was there just like one thing you did that was probably like the craziest growth hack you did to experience the most growth from this one thing? Any sort of advice you can give there, or experience you had that just kind of shot you up? Was there like a moment, maybe a week, a day, a month, where it just went crazy or bonkers for you?
Yeah, I'll tell you two stories. So one is the white label reseller program. That was not my idea. I actually had a customer who built a couple hotel apps. I think you might have read this in the book if you're further enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I got him on the phone because I thought he owned the hotels. And I'm like 22, and I'm like, oh, I don't know, he's a millionaire. He's got some business advice. But it turns out he owned an agency in Switzerland, and he was building apps on behalf of his hospitality clients. And then my next immediate question really fast came out, how can I get you to sell more of these apps? Like, whoa. And his English wasn't his first language. And so he said, like, if you could white label the apps, I could set my own pricing. And we didn't have that functionality built out. And so I said, if you could do a pre-commitment, I believe it was a 100 app commitment, we'll build that for you, and we'll have it done in 2 weeks, and we'll give you a huge discount. So you won't be paying $50 a month per app. You'll be paying, 10 if you pay upfront. And he did. And then we rushed to build the functionality, and that's when we just exploded. And then another moment was, I remember maybe 6 months later, as the business started to become more agency, we shifted everything after, that moment. We were like, this is And we went from selling one app at a time to selling 100 apps at a
Mm,
time, like overnight.
wow.
So the distribution of our product was just exponential from there. But one crazy day was on a Sunday. I decided it was an Easter Sunday, and I was with my girlfriend, now wife, family, Easter event. She's Italian, so it's a big event. Of course. And I remember like sitting at her house at her computer, and I just made like our white label reseller program is like 10% off today. And we grew by like, I believe like 25,000 in monthly recurring revenue in one day with no
Jeez.
sales reps and no one to answer the phone on that day. I had
Wow.
no idea what we were doing. And that's when I was like, whoa, like people just kept signing up. And so I think, a roundabout way to kind of package that in advice is, really talk to your customers, because they truly have the answers you need to improve your business. And they give that feedback for free if you just ask for it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And my last question for you, it's been a great interview. So thank you again for coming on the show. The last question for you is, what's next for MicroAcquire? You guys have done so well so far, and it's been really growing fast and built a great brand. What's on the horizon? What's the plan over the next 10 years? Do you have that mission and vision established, and you know exactly what's next for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I think, from, our mission, vision, purpose isn't really going to change over the next 10 years. I think we're just going to continue to make acquisitions easier. We're going to continue to automate a lot of the manual stuff that people are doing to have their startups acquired. We're also doing a rebrand to acquire.com, which is taking a lot of our time right now,
Yeah.
which is a lot of work, given all the content we have. But 10 years from now, I would love for MicroAcquire to be the default option for you to sell your business for 10K or 100 million.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how we're thinking, is we want to be, the Zillow for M&A, where, if you want to list your business like and you kind of have a Zillow make me move price, sure.
Yeah.
Or if you need to sell your business fast, or just every type of acquisition in between, whether it's a financial acquisition or it's a strategic acquisition, we want to be kind of the connector for all acquisitions of all different sizes.
Yeah. That's fantastic. Well, I definitely wish you luck, and obviously I'm using the software, and so if other people want to use the software, currently it's still microacquire.com, correct? So people can just go sign up there. And is there anywhere else they should go, or anything else they should take you up on in terms of getting involved in the community and the software?
Yeah, you can go to MicroAcquire, MacroAcquire, or acquire.com.
Oh, it's all redirecting the same place.
Yeah. So
Nice.
after we closed a few like big deals, people were like, "Oh, this is the micro, this is macro." So I bought the domain. But on a serious note, microacquire.com, or just follow me on Twitter, LinkedIn, or feel free to just shoot me an email, andrew@microacquire.com.
That is fantastic. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate having you on, man. Really means a lot. And for everybody who is listening to the show, it was great having Andrew on. Andrew has built MicroAcquire to a behemoth in the startup acquisition space, and we're really excited to see all the growth going forward. Everything he's been able to do so far has been fantastic. Started Business Apps back when he was 22. If you haven't read his book yet, definitely check it out. You can get on Audible, Amazon, anywhere you get your ebooks. I'm reading it right now. It's really good. So thank you, Andrew, so much for being on the show. It's been fantastic. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.